everyone, welcome back to Feather Stitch House. My name's Rebecca and each week on this channel I upload videos about embroidery and textile art to help you get creative. If you're new here, do have a look around. There is a huge list of videos and lots of playlists that probably have got something that will float your boat, so do have a mooch around. And if you're a regular, so good to see you again. Thanks for coming back. Now today we are in week 4 of our July panel and we're going to add some sparkle and embellishment to bring our scene to life. And we're also going to make it a little bit more postcard-like, as well as adding our border. We'll finish off our panel today and we'll be able to see the results of all our hard work over the last few weeks. Anything in your stash that's going to add a little bit of shimmer and a little bit of bling, that's what you need to get today. So gather your bits and pieces and let's get stitching.
So here's where we left off last week, and like I said last week, the more I look at this, the more I'm enjoying it. I think there's just such gorgeous texture across the panel and it does look really graphic, a bit like a print, and I think that's kind of magic. So I think we are going to wrap things up this week by adding some finishing touches. So the idea of this was to create a holiday postcard. Most postcards that have an image of a location have some sort of wording on them to suggest where that location is, and this is a technique that we've used on several of our pieces. Particularly our June panel from last month, we printed some labels for our planets with stamps on linen, just with little letter stamps, and we've done it before as well. I've been adding in month labels on my panels as well, just so that I've got a sense of what month it is, and I thought we could do something similar again today. We did it back in February as well with our poetry panels. So we printed out lines from poems, short phrases from poems, and added them on. And I think things like this are really useful for harmonising a large project. So we're making a lot of these panels that are quite big, and they are all very different colour schemes, different styles, different techniques, and so we do need something, I think, across the panel or the book that you're making. I'm making a wall hanging, but I know some of you are turning yours into a book. Either way, a little feature that harmonises the panels, I think, is really useful. So we're going to make a little label and attach it, and I've also, this is so that you know what to get hold of, I've also dug out some beads. So I wanted some white ones. I found my white box here. I've got some greens and aquas, and I've got a range of beads as well. So some of them are bugle beads, some of them are very round. I have got some sequins in here as well, and I've got some sort of teal turquoise, and then I've also got some blue beads. I know this looks like I've got loads of beads. I've got small amounts of quite a lot of beads. Most of them are acquired. That sounds like I stole them. I really didn't. People give me stuff and I have gained quite a lot of beads through just being gifted things. So I've got some nice turquoise and blue beads there as well. So I thought we could dot some around. I've also got, I think I used some of these in the door panel. I've also got these really earthy ones which I thought might be nice dotted around the rocks if we can add some texture in there. So there's plenty of variety. So you're going to need some stamps, some fabric to stamp onto, and some ink of your choice, and some beads and thread. And then finally we're going to bind our panel just like we have done with all the others. So I'll trim this back and put some binding on, and I've tried to find some batik fabric that matches, so I'll show you that a little bit later. Full transparency, at the point I'm starting filming this, it hasn't arrived yet. So I have splashed out and bought a tiny little offcut of some batik fabric because I just had absolutely nothing. I know it's hard to believe, I had nothing at all in my stash that looked like it belonged. So hopefully that will be okay. So I'm just going to get my stamp stuff together and then we'll get going. Right, I've got my blue ombre stamp pad. Thought that worked quite nicely with the colour scheme, and I've also got my various stamps, letter stamps. I'm a little bit torn because I've done all my lettering on this natural linen. I've just found a tiny offcut here, but when I laid it on, it doesn't seem to look quite right with, because we've got some white showing through. Just worried it didn't look quite right, and I wondered whether white would be better. So it's just fabric. I'm going to do a bit of a trial, so I'm going to try the different sizes and try the different fabrics and see which one I think looks best. What I don't want to do is cover up too much of my textural stitching, so I want to be quite cautious with this. So let's just give it a whirl and see what we find. Just got a little bit of scrap paper to put underneath because I don't want ink all over my ironing mat. Now I'm going to put the name of my location in the language of that location. So mine is an Italian lake. So let's start with the biggest set of letters. So I'm just going to give it a whirl. Right, already I think this is going to be too big. I'm just dabbing the stamp on the ink pad and just double checking that there's ink all over it. There's not as much variation in colour as I hoped there would be, but it doesn't look, I suppose actually if I look at it through the camera it does look a lot more varied. So that's the large one. Let me just get out the medium size one. Let's go for it again. If you aren't sure what I'm printing here, it's Lake Garda in Italian. And I should be there as this video goes live, so I'm hoping to do a little video about anything that I see that inspires me while I'm there. It's great, isn't it, when you travel to just see something different. When we have our lives on repeat where we just follow the same pattern every day, it's sometimes difficult to feel inspired all the time and be creative. I get a lot of comments about the ideas I come up with and how do I come up with them, and I don't really know. I suppose I'm just thinking about creating all the time. This is my job. It's a bit of a luxury to be able to be free to do that. But even when I was teaching, I spent quite a lot of time thinking about what I was going to make next and planning for my next project. So if you're feeling a bit dry creatively, there are some things that I do to sort of relight creative spark, because I do have times where I don't feel very inspired at all. So even if I feel a little bit stuck, a little bit blocked, and like I don't know what to do with myself, or I'm not feeling particularly inspired, I try and just sew anyway. I've got loads of projects on the go all the time. Sometimes it's a bit overwhelming and, dare one say, irresponsible to have so much. I think I counted up 11 projects the other day. My sister was here and she was a bit bewildered by how many things I was working on simultaneously. And she was saying how she can't cope working like that because she likes to do one thing at a time. And I kind of like to do one thing at a time, but I tend to dry up. I think I get bored quite easily, and so it's nice sometimes to have projects that I have on the go that I just dip in and out of. I think that really helps me. So try and sew anyway, even if you're lacking in creativity, just like your physical body. If you're feeling sluggish, the best thing to do is move. It's the same with your creative muscles. If you're feeling a bit creatively dry, the best thing to do is create. I think that's too big. Another thing I do is I do a kit by another creator. I've never done a kit by another creator and not learnt something new. It is just fabulous. It's really good discipline. So I create my own things all the time, but I am very aware that my frame of reference is limited to what I already know. I think that one's better. Other creators work in different ways to me, and I learn so much about process, about style. Some people do kits and immediately make them their own. I try to stay quite faithful to the kit and the way it was designed because I know how I create. I want to learn how somebody else creates and the processes that they use. And so there's merit in both. If you want to put your personal stamp on it, I think that's really great. But sometimes I benefit from just doing it somebody else's way. And sometimes I've decided that I think my way is preferable. But there are times where I've discovered that somebody else has got a better way of doing something than me. See, I think that one's too small. So I think we're going for the medium sized one. Oh, it's like little, what's her name? Goldilocks. The one in the middle is just right. So that's what I'm going to do. Let me just try it with the linen. I think that's the right size. I'm just going to try a linen version and see what I think of that. Another thing that I do is go somewhere different. So break my routine. If I'm struggling to be creative, a break in routine is really good. So going and seeing something new. I'm a member of the National Trust, which I know lots of people struggle with the National Trust because of the heritage of a lot of the properties, but I don't really go around houses very much, but I do love gardens and I have some all-time favourite National Trust locations. If you've never been to Craigside in Northumberland, get in your car and go immediately. It is just amazing. It's so inspiring. So I love Craigside. Belton House, I think, is great. Just going somewhere different, getting outside of your four walls, seeing something new. Travel is very inspiring, and I know that's not something that everybody is able to do. I'm excited about the things that I'm going to see. Different plants, different skies, different light. Now, which one looks better? You can all shout at me on camera, tell me which one you prefer, and then when I pick the wrong one, you can shout at me again. White or linen? It's really helpful to look at it through the camera. I I think I'm going to go white, you know. I think it's more postcardy. I think if it was postcard, it would be on a white background, so that's what I'm going to go for. Right, I'm going to be very undisciplined and just move this stuff to the side. Clean those up in a bit. I just happen to have some of the thread that I was using. It's thread that I used in the sky, but I'm going to use that to stitch down my label. Now, you might think that I should get on with the beads, but what I don't want is to put beads where I want my label to go. So that's why we've started with the label. I'm just going to pop a pin. Oh, that pin's got a bit of a jaunty angle to it. That one needs to go in my sharps jar. Do I want to do running stitch like that? Maybe I do. I do genuinely believe that human beings are built with creativity as part of them, and you only have to watch children at play to convince yourself of that. If you watch children at play, you don't ever get them comparing their ability to invent a game to somebody else's. They just all build on each other's ideas, and children come home with their artwork and are enormously proud of it always and insistent that you display it. And I don't know what happens to us as we leave childhood, but we start to become really self-critical and comparative. I don't know where our need to compare comes from. We always tend to look at our work and compare it to the work of the person next to us and make a value judgment about it. And there's no value judgment to be made. If it's come from your hand, then it's yours. It's part of you, and it has merit. And it might not be technically as good, but it's yours. So just be proud of it, own it. I think the only point of comparison that's worth making is comparing you now to you a while ago. And if there's growth, if there's change or movement, then everything's good. So take the pressure off yourself. Just create. Go for it. And I hope that this channel helps a little bit with that. That's why I do it. I didn't really start on YouTube to become well known or make money or anything like that. It was purely a desire to help other people get creative and just discover that deep vein of creativity that runs through each of us. And for some of us, we've buried it deep, very, very deep, but it's still there. It's all those people that tell me they're not creative then go on to tell me all the things that they used to do when they were young, when they were children, which tells me that it is there somewhere. You just have to rediscover it. And I think as women, we often don't give ourselves the freedom to be creative. We're so busy looking after everybody else. But it's part of being human. It's part of the human experience. It's what we're meant to do. So, anyway, thanks for coming to my TED Talk. There we go. So I've got a little label. If I just pop my aperture on, I've buried it. There we go. Oh, it's looking more postcardy by the moment. I love it. Right, so we've got our label. Now we're going to add our beads. Okay, I've got out a selection of beads here. Let me move it up a little bit. And I've just put them on my ironing mat. These are great. If you don't have one of these, this is just a wool felt ironing pad. They're really great as work surfaces, but they're great for beading because if I was to work on my desk, they would just roll around, and something like this works really well to just control your beads a little bit. If you don't have one of these, just lay down a piece of, if you have got a scrap of velvet or felt, any fabric that's got a bit of a pile would work really well. Don't have something too textured though, because your beads will just disappear. So something like a tweed, you'll lose beads in the weave. So just something that's got a little bit of fluff to it where your beads can sit. Now, because I'm using a variety of bead sizes, I want to have a needle that's definitely going to go through, and so there are some that I would recommend. There are milliner's needles which we tend to use for things like bullion knots and cast on stitch and things like that. These are really good because the shaft of the needle is the same width as the eye. So basically, if you can get your bead halfway along the needle, it's going to come off the end because they are totally straight up and down. And you can get different brands of these and different sizes. So these are Clover, and it's a multi-pack of, or like a variety pack, and the needles are size 3, 5, 7 and 9. So the way this works is the bigger the number, the smaller the needle. So this would be a size 9, this would be a size 3, and this is the same size range but a different brand. So Millwood. These are Gold-Eye. Gold-Eye are slightly easier to thread, so just a little bit smoother, but this is where you get your needle threader out because the eyes tend to be quite small. The other thing that you can use is needles that are designed for beading. The only thing I would say about beading needles is they tend to be quite long, but they are very, very thin, and so they bend really easily. So if you're working through multiple layers of fabric, then you might find that these bend and break and become difficult to use. So I'm going to use a milliner's needle, and I did already get one out, but I've put it somewhere safe and now I can't find it, so we're just getting another one. And I'm just going to thread it up. Always take your needle to the thread rather than your thread to the needle if you struggle to thread. So if you pinch the thread tightly between your fingers so just a tiny end comes out, and then just sit the needle on top of that thread. I just wiggle the needle a little bit and then catch the end. If it won't go through, try flipping the needle over, because most needles are made by punching the eye into a thin wire, and so there will be one side that whatever direction the punch has gone through, that will be the direction that's easier to thread in. You will have a slight burr on the bottom, and so sometimes you'll find that you can't thread your needle. Just flip it over and you might find that you are able to after all. So I'm putting a really big quilter's knot on my thread. I've just got some normal polyester sewing cotton here, and what we're going to make is little sticks of beads. Let's start in the foreground because it will be easier to show you. So I'm just going to bring my needle through, and I'm just going to pick up a fairly random selection of beads, so I don't want there to be a pattern. Another way of doing this would be to just put them in a jar and swirl your needle around in it and just see what picks up. So there's a little post of random beads there on my needle, so I'm just going to pull those through and let them just sit on the surface of my fabric. Now you can either make your stitch shorter than the length of the beads, and that will make them dangle down in a little curve. So if you're doing C, you might want your beads to swag a little bit like that. So the shorter you make it, the deeper the swag will be. I just want mine to sit fairly straight, so I'm going to lay my thread along the fabric, push the beads up so that they are lined up, and then put my needle through. It's another use for my ironing mat because I can take my needle through, and that will secure it. That tells me where to put my needle. If you want to, before you tie off, you can put a little couching knot. If your stick of beads is quite long, you can just come up halfway along it and put a stitch over the top, and you won't see it because it will just disappear in between the beads, but it will just keep it stable. And then I'm going to do a sizable quilter's knot on the back, and I'm going to put a knot at the start and end of each line, because if any of these threads break, I'll only lose those beads, I won't lose all of them. So I'm going to put some of these little sticks of beads periodically all over the lake, and my sticks will be smaller as I go back. So try not to work your way around your little selection of beads in the same way. Sometimes you might want to put two of the same bead next to each other. It's entirely up to you. So you can see I'm just catching the bead with the tip of my needle. Probably made that too similar in length. You want to kind of keep it varied. I'm just going to put an extra couple of beads on to make it slightly longer than the other one. And maybe I need to go in the opposite direction actually. That's better already. So just think about your spacing. Think about how they sit together. A little couching stitch over the top. Like that. You can cut off your thread if you want to. I'm just going to put one more little stick. Where shall I put it? Let's go just above, in this space here. Make a slightly shorter one this time. There we go. So lay it down, push your beads along, take your needle through, and then put a little couching stitch over if you want to. Because we're making little strings of beads, they won't sit dead straight. They will when they get a bit smaller, but there'll be some natural movement in them. So I hope you get the idea. I'm loving that, just that bit of sparkle that is adding a little bit more texture. So I'm going to put those in and we'll see if we need any beads anywhere else. Okay, so here is my beading on the lake. You can see I've spread them out. I haven't overdone it because again we don't want to lose our stitching, we don't want to lose the batik, but I think it's worked really nicely, and if I just move it you can see the light catching. I think it just makes it look so much more dynamic, and obviously they're sitting proud of the surface, so we've got some texture there as well. And if you look down by the rocks, I have laid out some beads and sequins. So I've got these. I don't know what the stone is. If you can recognise it, do let me know, because I think they're beautiful. I'd love to be able to find it. These lovely sort of opalescent shimmery, that is just the sort of opalescence of the bead there that's shimmering. It's lovely. So I've got some little round ones, these sort of oval shaped ones. I'm sure there's a, they cabochons? I don't know. I don't know beads very well. I just like using them. And then I've got these sort of earthy toned ones as well. And I also had these sort of metallic bronzy coloured sequins as well, and I've just sort of scattered some of those around on the rocks, and I'm really liking the way that that looks, just to texturise the rocks a little bit more. So I think I'm going to stitch those on. What I was wondering is whether I needed something along the line between the hills in the background and the sandy area, and I was looking at the greens that I've got in my stash. I've got these sort of green, I think these are plastic, they don't look gold to me, but I wondered whether some of those might be of interest. And I've got some other greens as well. I wondered whether that might just texturise that horizon a little bit more. So I'm just having a mooch through to see what I've got. I've also got, I often have these little sections where it's just a mixture of beads, like one-off beads. So I think maybe if I could texturise that line along the edge of the sand just with some random green beads, I think that might also look quite nice. I think I'm going to leave the sand as it is. I think I'm going to leave the trees and the sky, but I think it might be nice to just have a little bit more bead texture somewhere other than just the water. So I'm going to just have a play around with those and stitch them on, probably one at a time in exactly the same way, just to add a little bit of dimension at different points in the piece. So that's what I'm going to do next. So I'll kind of stitch them as they land, just in kind of random clusters, a bit like how I've laid them out there, and I'll stitch those on and then I'll come back and show you the next stage. Okay, here we go. So I've put in some beads and sequins amongst the rocks, and I've probably overdone this, but I've put a line of green beads along the top. Got one that's a little bit loose there, might have to just stitch that down again. And so we're pretty much done. We've done our label. Let me just pop the aperture on it again, just so that you can see how it's looking. Oh, I'm really happy with it. Yeah, I'm very happy with that. I think it's worked out really nicely. So what we have to do now is trim it back. You can see I've drawn my lines as my guide to where I'm going to trim to, and I managed to find some batik fabric. I will have a look and see if there's any still available. If there is, I'll put a link in the description below. I really liked the striations of this and I thought the colours worked quite well. So what I've done is I've taken two strips that I've cut along the pattern, so the striations going horizontally, and I'm going to use those at the top and bottom, so they'll sit there. Which one is it? Here we go. There and there, and I can check which side I like the best, and then I've done two strips where the striations go horizontally, so I can put those along the sides like that, and then everything seems to head in the right direction like that. So that's what I'm going to use to border it. I think the colours are much better with this. It's that sort of tealy turquoisey colour that I think is working quite well. If you aren't sure about this process, I covered it in detail in January part 4. I will link that video at the top there, and I think I showed it again last month, but I'll look back through the videos and remind myself. But the January video tells you all about the process. These are 8 centimetre wide strips, and I've folded them in half and pressed it, and then I folded the sides into the centre. So it's a kind of binding. It's not bias binding, you're not going to have loads of stretch, but they're only going along straight edges, so it's not a problem. And I'll put the long ones on first, and then the ones at the sides I'm just going to fold back 1 centimetre before I stitch them on, and that will give me a neat end to my binding. So I'll get on with that, and then I'll come back and show you the finished piece. So here it is, our finished holiday postcard, and I am so delighted. I've just been chatting away with Rick about it because it's strangely familiar to him. As an Italian person, it's got that sort of familiarity of home about it. I was trying to work out why I'm so delighted with it, and I think it is because I genuinely don't plan these pieces. I have no idea what's going to happen. I start with an idea at the beginning of the month and a sort of general sense of direction, and what happens after that is anyone's guess. And so when I started this back in week 1 with the batik, I really didn't know what we were going to do in terms of stitch, and the piece just sort of emerges and grows as the month progresses. It's got me really in the mood for my holiday, which is good because I find the idea of going on holiday quite daunting, particularly going on holiday into another country. It's not something I ever did as a child, and I haven't done it very much as an adult either, so it's all very sort of a little bit intimidating and scary, but I think I just want to be in this location. So it's just made me really happy. And my biggest fear with this piece was that we were going to lose any sense of the fact that there's a batik underneath. And I think we've honoured the batik with the stitching. We've done it in a way that doesn't take away from that watery, waxy quality. We've just kind of enhanced it, I think. So I hope you've enjoyed this one as much as I have. I love the textural quality, and I wonder if I can just move it so that the beads catch the light. That shimmer that you get all around is reminiscent of that bright sunlight you get in Mediterranean countries, the really strong light. I think it works, and I hope you think so too. And even though I kind of broke my rules to buy the batik fabric, I'm so glad I did, because I think it works really well with this piece and kind of frames it in a really pleasing way. So that's it for this week. If you have enjoyed this process, please do give this video a like, please do subscribe and turn on notifications, because I upload videos at the same time every Sunday, but my Wednesday video sometimes comes on at different times during the day. So if you turn on notifications, you'll get all the updates when I upload something new. And let somebody that you know about this channel. Pass it on. Send this video to them, share it, and let's see if we can grow this community even more. I am absolutely brimming over with excitement to see what you create in your holiday postcards. Do share them at hashtag FSHWingingIt24. If you are on Instagram and on Facebook, we have a private Facebook group, and I'll put details of that in the description below, so you can click on a link and it will take you straight there. You just have to agree to the group rules and then I'll let you in. Thanks so much for watching. If you want some more inspiration for stitching and textile art, I will link a video over here, and I'll put the whole Winging It 24 playlist down here so that you can go back and catch up on any of the panels in this series so far. Have a great week. happy holidays if you are off somewhere new or if you're breaking up this week, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.